All right, good morning, folks, wherever you are out there. Welcome. You are listening to the Charge Life Podcast. I'm Joseph Barletta, and this is where we discuss EVs and all things EV charging. Hey, glad you could pull over and park with us today. So let's get plugged in. Look, today's episode's all about the EV Charging Infrastructure Conference of the South. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about it. I think you guys are going to love this one. But hey, before we begin today's episodes brought to you by Smart Charge America. Since 2007, Smart Charge America has installed tens of thousands of EV charging stations nationwide, and they can do the same for you today. Whether in the home, commercial, service, let their team of expert installation specialists guide you to the best charging station solution for your EV charging needs. After all, if you can't charge, you can't drive. Visit smartchargeamerica.com today to get started. Okay, here we go. Subject: EV Charging Infrastructure South Conference. Now, just wanted to let you know that's where we've been at for the past few weeks. We've been like to back-to-back conferences. So you got me back. We're back here. Essentially, there's a company called Global Transmission Report. They make a lot of their money off of magazines and articles and stuff like that, and pulling industry professionals together. And as a result, they've managed to pull this particular conference together. It's literally called EV Charging Infrastructure South Conference. Now, you're thinking big conference, nice hotel, really good meeting space. There's lunch involved. There's coffee. There's breakfast. Like, what's all what all does it entail? I think it's like $1,000. To just attend these things, like $1,500 as an attender or vendor, $1,000 just an attend. So it's pretty expensive. But one of the things that I wanted to kind of bring to light was the fact that, like, while I was there and I'm attending this conference, there wasn't really that much focus with regards to actual EV charging infrastructure, like on the infrastructure side of things, the planning, the building, the drawing, the contracting, the civil part, the moving earth, the networking side of things. Like, none of it was there, and so I was pretty disappointed in those efforts. But one of the common themes was around, I guess, transit buses, like municipality, citywide, transit buses, in addition to school buses. Kind of electrification of school buses. Which I thought, like, I'm fascinated by that, and I can see how people can get really, really motivated on that end. But you're dealing with schools, and they have some of the tightest budgets out there. So if there's not enough grant funding coming down from agencies, via state, local, regional, it's gonna be really tough to get some of these ISDs on board in that transition. Now, look, get me if I'm wrong. I think the government should be full. If it was up to me, take half of the 7.5 on the public EV charging infrastructure thing and put it all towards electrifying buses, like nationwide. Like, that is the absolute best way that we can go about, spending our money, in my opinion. Just, it's for the kids, man. We all know that. We all understand it. But one of the also common themes that was out there was talking about multifamily charging, right? Multifamily charging is difficult on the infrastructure side because there's so many, like, garden style homes and apartment homes and apartment complexes where you have a giant apartment complex and they have several garden style buildings in each one of those complexes. Well, the electrical panels that are inside of those buildings, they generally will have one house panel, and that house panel is very limited with power because it's only supplying like a lighting load, maybe a small landscape irrigation mode or something like that, loads towards like facilitating that building's electrical supply. And then, of course, there may be 8 buildings total on site, but you really don't have a lot of space or capacity inside one of those panels. I mean, each one is like maybe 60 amps max that we'll get out of there. So maybe we could put one charger out of those panels. This is all, of course, post-construction when we're going. So those are some of the complexes, complications around, designing and putting in as much multifamily charging infrastructure out there. But one of the things and themes on that end was, hey, if you build it, they will come, right? If you build it, they will come. And I get it. It's just, like, how long will it take for them to come? And then even when they are there, how much will they utilize the stations? And will they be courteous to other drivers and not sit there and squat on the actual charger? Does the development have flexible pricing policies to elicit that type of behavior from their drivers? I don't know. These are all things. Another thing was like equitable charging. They want to make sure that charging is equitable. And here's my opinion on the whole equitable charging thing. I'm all for it. The problem is if you rely on the private markets to actually build this infrastructure from the ground up, you're not really going to get a lot of equitable distribution because these private markets are generally going to install these chargers where there's going to be the most usage so that way they can get a better return and a faster return on their investment. And unfortunately, right now in some of the lower income disadvantaged areas, there's just not a lot of movement when it comes to EVs and not a lot of traffic, not a lot of heat happening in those areas with EVs. And so it doesn't mean that there's not any, it just means that there's not an overabundance as there would to be able to drive some of that adoption from the private markets. That's all we're saying. So if we want charging to be equitable, there's going to be some heavy, massive funding from both local, city, and state, regional, kind of organizations. And we do see that a lot with the NEVI funds and how they've planned, especially in the state of Texas and other states, how they're planning their kind of attack on putting in as much infrastructure as possible. They're not leaving out the rural guys. They're not leaving out the other communities. They're trying to make sure that they're taking care of at least each county throughout the state to make sure that it's fairly distributed amongst anyone out of the public that can actually use that infrastructure. One of the things that was also talked about was education. Now, much like real estate, it's like location, location, location. And this conference was all about education, 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 okay? And I get it. Look, for what's about to happen in the next 5-10 years, we do need to start setting up, training programs and getting people more involved in, correct way of putting in this EV charging infrastructure, and getting basically schools to adapt curriculums that will transfer to the job force, and then also having manufacturers and OEMs actually, cultivate with local schools to bring, that talent indoors to be able to continue to grow the industry from within. And we see this already with what Tesla's doing out here in Texas, inside the small city, near, I guess, right next to Austin, with regards to, setting up their Ad Astra school. And they're doing all kinds of community things to just literally funnel kids into the profession to get them back into more manufacturing jobs out there, right? You have to be able to elicit the talent that's around you and shape and mold that talent, because that talent is not always going to be, Silicon Valley talent. You may have to shape that talent to be exactly what it is that you want. And if I know anything about Tesla, they do an amazing job of that, and they will continue to do that because they see education, education, education. That is a fundamental, really good backbone of this conference. Then you got another. There was a couple companies that came up and talked about hydrogen fuel cell and fueling charging stations. And one of the things that I didn't realize on the hydrogen fuel side of things is that basically a hydrogen fuel station costs about $5 million per port. That's how much it costs just for one pump. About $5 million on average. Okay. And then the refueling time that it takes between the tanks repressurizing themselves and the price point per, cubic foot. Oh, I don't know, whatever type of measurables they have with regards to like being put into the tank. It seemed like it was not. It was almost price parity with gasoline prices. And then it took the same amount of time to actually refill the tanks as it would on the consumer side, as it would, like, let's say a DC fast charging, session that has a low kilowatt, it probably takes you like maybe 45 minutes to an hour to get your tanks, full again. So if the price parity with gasoline, but then you're also looking at the same charging time as a DC fast charger, it's like, why wouldn't you just go with the DC fast charger? But I get it. The hydrogen fuel cell stuff, that basically looks like it's more geared towards the, kind of heavy duty, mid-size, trucking industry, as opposed to kind of the light duty, consumer vehicles. We see that with Toyota, I think it's, I don't know what that name was, like Mirai or something, Toyota Mirai, just god awful experiences with fueling station dependency. And keep in mind, it's still a depot model. They're still following the depot model. You're still having to be inconvenienced of going wherever you are. Now you have to go to that fueling station, pay their prices, right? And the market's just not there really to balance out the distribution play with regards to the pricing on that actual commodity. So in my opinion, the hydrogen fuel cell stations at $5 million a port. Do you realize how many charging stations I can install if you gave me $5 million as an electrical contractor exclusively focused on EV charging? We are averaging, if we have sites of, let's say, 20 or more chargers, we at cost could probably do somewhere like, and this is really, really efficient. This is like everything going our way. We could probably be somewhere at about $1,000 per port. So someone divide 5 million into 1,000, and you let me know how many charging stations we can put out there for $5 million. And I believe the answer to that question is gonna be 50,000 charging stations we can put in the ground for $5 million at that price point. I might be wrong though. I gotta carry the zeros. I'm not that good at math today. But anyway, yes, that's what we're talking about there on the hydrogen fuel cell. The repressurization loops that the fueling pump takes once it basically to recharge itself to be able to dispense the hydrogen to your vehicle. I didn't realize it had to repressurize itself like in the middle of the pumping session. So that repressurization could like loop that. I guess that could take a couple minutes just for it to finish, and that's why. That could happen several times during your pump session based on kind of the output of your tank and the charger and all of that good stuff. And then I didn't realize that there was like 4 different types of hydrogen. I really can't tell you the colors of them, but yeah, I didn't know a lot about hydrogen, but it was really good to learn, on that end. Hey guys, if you can, go ahead and click the thumbs up icon. If you remember us, click thumbs up icon, subscribe, like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. The algorithms, AI is running this whole thing. I'm not even here. I don't even know, but if you could help us out, that'd be great. All right, so getting kind of back on this, I do believe, like we talked about, that especially on the hydrogen fuel cell, I mean, like, if the cost of electricity per mile, let's say, or per gallon of fuel or whatever is, or let's say fill up is like 4 to 8 times cheaper, depending on your electric rates, and the hydrogen fuel cell is almost price parity, it doesn't really make a compelling argument for that. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of the consumer base struggle. I think they have PTSD from the natural gas vehicles and some of the other corn or ethanol based fueling systems. There's this PTSD that happens with lack of basically infrastructure. And if the infrastructure costs that much and then electricity is everywhere, it's like, why not? Anyway, I really thought that there was underrepresentation, from the infrastructure guys, the contractors, the charging providers, the charging operators. I wanted to see more of those. The event really didn't talk about, I guess, didn't have like vendor setups where you would set up tables and you'd be able to, showcase your products and kind of talk a little bit about, like, there wasn't like this big giant expo of stuff. It was more, it was basically, I don't know. I mean, from what I'm seeing, it was a lot of talk. There was, I guess it just seemed like everyone there was just kind of trying to figure out why they were there. It was just like the mood in the room. And I can't really describe it, but it was like, as a professional, especially in the trade, I was trying my hardest to really focus on some of the content and be able to add maybe a little bit here, maybe a little bit there. And it was hard for me. So I can imagine if somebody was just on the edge of the industry, wanting to come in and just kind of learn something, it was a really tough conference. Just to be able to systematically focus on the content, as a whole for a long period of time on what they were discussing. There were a few utility players, which I was fortunate enough to do, but none of them were really promising like programs that would really move the needle or impact, their customers. It just like there was no push for those programs. It was like, where's the push? Give me something. Like if you're going to be a utility company at an EV charging infrastructure conference, talk about what it is that you're doing to incentivize and push out as much infrastructure as possible. What are you doing? Are you helping out, the providers or the operators with, demand charges and, kind of flexible billing, stuff, tariffs or whatever for your EV charging, operators? What are you doing? Like there was no push. I was like, where's the push? Where's the insight push? And there was some talks with regards to like vehicle to age programs. I think GM was there with one of their representatives, which was great, But when it comes to vehicle to home, like the only people that really have this stuff down packed and like is Tesla. I'm gonna be honest with you. We've installed about 400 of these units already for the Cybertruck since January of 2024, and we're still learning. We're still kind of getting our stuff going, but it's a steady, kind of onslaught of constantly learning, making sure we have processes, getting more efficient at those processes. When those updates are coming out, how are those updates, affecting the other pieces of the UI and user interface and the hardware? What do our guys have to do on site when that software is released? Is there something that has to change with our process? There's a lot. And so when I hear the vehicle to age programs, it's just a lot of fluff, but it's not like any real concrete of like actually what's going on. Like some people don't even think that vehicle to home is like even a thing. Like they think that it's something that people will continue to talk about for the next 10 years. And I'm like, no guys, we're doing this stuff. Like we've been doing this stuff for like the past 2 years, and we are really doing this stuff with Tesla and the new Cybertruck with the Tesla Power Share feature. Like this is happening. This is some cool stuff. Like literally, if you look at the Cybertruck, like the Foundation series, I don't really need the Foundation series on the Cybertruck because I already have power walls, I have gateways, I have the Tesla ecosystem, right? I just don't have the Cybertruck. So like the Foundation series comes with all this other stuff that you can buy. It's like $20,000 more. And Tesla's going to continue to ride that train until they just pull the trigger on, all right, let's start accepting the $79,000. Let's get rid of let's do away with, sunset the Foundation series vehicles and start really getting serious to ramping that up. And I think that's probably going to come somewhere around 125,000 per year in production capacity. I think right now they're sitting about 75,000 per year, maybe between like 1,400 and 1,500 per week. So let's say 75,000 just to be, kind of on the safe side. They still have to ramp up, good, 1,000 more units per week in order to get to that, 125,000, mark. So when they do that, or hell, I mean, look, if they go ahead and open that bad boy up tomorrow, I got 2 reservations. I'm converting immediately overnight because I already have this. I don't need the stuff that complements or that comes with the Foundation series. I don't care about laser edging on the side of my truck. And quite frankly, I'm not really one to purchase a first generation technology. I'm more into like the maybe 3rd iteration of that technology, right? So, it was with Sandy Monroe where, the first Model Y he tore apart, it was only after, they already tore apart the Model S and the Model 3. And he tore apart the Model Y and he saw a lot of things and he pressured and he talked about it and he tried to make as many comments as possible. And then he got himself, I could think like 2 years later on like the 2020 Model Y and or like the 2021 Model Y. I think it was the 2020 Model Y. It was during COVID. He got himself his hands on the 2nd version of the Model Y. And that car, he said, was the greatest car he's ever tore apart. He said with the casting and everything, he said all kinds of stuff. And right there, that's exactly when I knew I'm buying a Model Y. That's exactly when I pulled the trigger. When Sandy Monroe, like the Titan, the tear down Titan, told me this is the greatest car he's ever tore down. That's when I knew. That's it. So, all things considered, agenda-wise, I mean, the agenda was pretty short. It was pretty thorough. They did run it was like a lack of respect on time wise. They did run behind on a lot of these speaking sessions. It's like, dude, there's nothing else going on here, and all you have to do is stay aligned and stay on time with your speaking sessions. And they were like 20 minutes off on their speaking sessions, and so people would just, there was just no real conscientious thing with regards to like making sure content is being rehearsed, content is necessary for the audience and for the topics. It just seemed there was a lot of winging out there, and there were a few really good presentations, but again, out of like, let's say 20 people that spoke, only like 2 people had presentations or something like that. Maybe 4 people had presentations that they were able to share with the audience members. So needless to say, I think it was more on kind of a think tank session. So, these conferences, they could do so much more, and they could do so much better, honestly. If you gauge the folks that were there and know, okay, these folks are attending something and it's costing them a pretty big penny, and it's serious. This is serious content. We need to be taking it serious, and it needs to be articulated and orchestrated and quite frankly categorized to make sure that you're holding the audience attention. You're getting a myriad of other things there, but it just seemed like there wasn't that much attention on the EV charging infrastructure side of things. It was like a manufacturing of charging inverters, bus manufacturing, electric bus manufacturing, and it's like, okay, well, that's great, but that's on the manufacturing side of things. It's not on the infrastructure side. There are dozens of EV shows and EV conferences you can go to, nationwide, that focus on the manufacturing side and the product side and all that stuff. This is an infrastructure play, and I felt like it should have been treated accordingly. And so for me, it just felt like it was a little unorganized, and it just gave people a chance to kind of get out of the office and go do something new. And, I just hope that that's not, like, it just seemed like the industry is not taking EV charging infrastructure very seriously. And it seems like the people that were there were just kind of high on their horse. And this is not all of them. I'm just saying, just some of them were kind of high on their horse and maybe resting on their laurels a little bit on what some of their previous, manufacturing prowess and accomplishments were, and what that's, hoping to do for the EV, hope what they could potentially be doing for the EV, charging market. But that's just not the attitude, man. It's not the attitude to go about things, in my opinion. I think you really need to focus, and maybe there's something Smart Charger America can do. Maybe we put on a little expo of our own, that really dives deeper into the charging infrastructure. If these guys can do it, kudos. Of course they have full-time staff that goes out and promotes these things, accordingly. But needless to say, it's not where the conference needed to be. And I was really disappointed that EV charging infrastructure didn't get their fair share of being put on the map, and didn't have those serious conversations that they need to have if the industry is going to be taken serious. And that's maybe part of the problem. Maybe part of the problem is people just aren't taking, EVs or the industry, serious, especially when it comes to EV charging infrastructure. There's an old additive, 10%, 90% of your charging occurs at home. Well, then that means 10% will occur in the public. So, how many charging stations does one need? Well, if you have 100,000 vehicles on your roads, typically what I would say is you need about 10,000 charging stations in your state. If you have 100,000, EVs registered in your state, you need about 10,000 public chargers. Okay, well, of that mix, how many DC fast charging, stations do I need out of that 10,000? How many, level 2 charging stations do I need out of the 10,000? Well, okay, now flip it on its side. When it looks like the use case, of the actual chargers itself, you're going to need 90-10 on that end again. So 90% level 2 charging, because that's, fundamentally a lower cost of deployment per port when it comes to charging infrastructure. And then, maybe 1,000 DC fast chargers, inside your actual state to complement the level 2 infrastructure that already exists. And then as your state continues to add more and more EVs, 200,000, 300,000, 400,000, you need to keep up with the amount of charging stations that actually are in your state in proportion to that amount, right? Until a certain point, maybe is reached saturation, and then you start focusing on utilization, much like Tesla did, with their, April 30th, debacle of the supercharger team. So that's it, guys. Look, thank you so much to our audience members today. Go ahead and click the thumbs up icon, share, comment, and subscribe to our channel if you think we earned it. Thanks again for charging up with us today. Look, keep in mind you can always find us at smartchargeamerica.com. And remember, folks, if you can't charge, you can't drive. We'll see you next time. Cheers.